Hi there. Welcome to our fifth week of how to be great at intuitive eating in midlife. So, we're wrapping up the series today. And if you've missed any of the previous 4 weeks, you can get them at the Savor Food and Body podcast. And the podcast is available on all major podcast players. So, today we are going to dive into body respect and gentle nutrition. And these two, I honestly spread them throughout my work with clients. They're very intertwined and they have a particular kind of essence about them for midlife, which is going to be really important to unpack today. So I'm excited to share all of that with you. And once again, like I'm recording this multiple places. So if you see me kind of looking up at an angle, I'm talking to the folks on Instagram, and then those of you that are here watching on the Savor Food and Body YouTube channel, and also on the Facebook group, Savor Food and Body Facebook group and Facebook page. So let's jump in. And as a reminder, if we haven't met already, I'm Amanda Bullat. I'm a registered dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor, and I'm a strong advocate for helping you savor food and body in midlife. And as a former athlete with a disordered relationship with food and exercise, and now a woman in my 40s, I live for helping women in midlife undiet their lives through intuitive eating, mindfulness, and wellness without obsession. So during this whole month, I've been teaching you how to create a healthy relationship with food through intuitive eating and with the nuances that come with being in midlife. So our conversations have been based on the principles of intuitive eating that were created by Evelyn Tripoli and Elise Rush, two dietitians back in the 90s, and have since gone on to be well researched by over 100 papers and research studies showing the benefits of intuitive eating on overall long-term health as opposed to the more restrictive way of eating of diets. So if you've missed those other 4 episodes of how to be great at intuitive eating in midlife, again, you can find them on the Savor Food and Body podcast. And below, wherever you're watching this, there is a link to find the podcast. Again, it's available on all major podcast players. So another piece that if you'd like to ask more specific questions about this series, about intuitive eating or nutrition for midlife or anything else that relates to healing your relationship with food, I highly encourage you to come to the free drop-in office hour. I'm holding one more for this series, and that will be on Friday this week, February 3rd at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And you can get a link to sign up to register for those office hours below wherever you're watching this. So it's free to come, but then I just know who's coming if you sign up for it. So I'd love to have you there. I'd love to answer your questions. So far we have talked about how to reject the diet mentality, make peace with all foods. And in week 2, I shared about how to identify food police thoughts and how to focus on satisfaction with food to keep those food police thoughts at bay, because your brain doesn't do two things at the same time very well. And in week 3, we learned about what I call the hunger fullness spectrum and why it can be hard to honor subtle signs of hunger and how satisfaction plays a critical role in finding comfortable fullness. And last week, we talked about how to create an emotional coping toolbox and why it's important to include food, even if you think emotional eating is at the very root of your dysfunctional relationship with food. So, emotional eating is something I talk about a lot with my clients, and there is a lot to dive into with that story and dive into your story with emotional eating and in your relationship with food. So if you feel like you're an emotional eater and there's a lot of shame and guilt around that, just know that you are not alone in feeling that way. It's super, super common. And last week's episode, we talked about how to navigate that from an intuitive eating perspective. We also talked about how exercise or movement that promotes body kindness, strength, and empowerment and doesn't focus on before and after pictures can be a critical part of intuitive eating in midlife, as well as a really great emotional coping tool. So, all of that, you can find those past recordings on the Savor Food and Body podcast. And we're going to wrap up this series that we've been doing with talking about body respect and gentle nutrition. And as I mentioned at the top of the call, to be honest, I am working with when I'm working with one-on-one clients, these principles of body respect and gentle nutrition are really woven throughout everything that we do. So let's dive into to body respect first. And the general definition or the original definition of this principle from Evelyn Tripoli and Elise Rush encourages body positivity by honoring your genetic blueprint with kindness and compassion. And I just think it's so funny, kind of more funny in like an ironic perspective, in that, especially in Western cultures, there are certain parts of our bodies that we don't really think much about in terms of their size, their shape, whatever. But then other parts of our bodies, like there's so much wrapped up into them: guilt, shame, um, weight stigma, fat phobia. And it's just interesting in how we pick our bodies apart in that way in terms of how we're going to judge ourselves on certain body parts, but not others. So, for example, at least in our Western cultures, we don't try to change the size of our feet just so that they can fit into a size 6 shoe if you're a size 9 shoe. Like, we don't really think that much about that. But when it comes to our bellies or our butts or our thighs, there can be a ton of stigma, stress, and anxiety and shame when those body parts are bigger, rounder, softer, whatever. So I just find it really interesting that we pick our bodies apart when it's all one entity that carries you through life and gets helps you experience life. So for women in midlife, I like to go even a little bit deeper on this principle, because with this definition, aside from the body image part of it and the body positivity part of it, which I 100% support, but there's in midlife, we also tend to become more concerned with certain aspects of our health, increasing blood sugar, increasing um, cholesterol, blood pressure, a variety of things that start coming up, maybe awareness about family history of cancer or something like that. So there becomes kind of this messy middle of, well, how do I honor and respect my body, size and shape of it, of where it is, and how do I honor my health? I'm concerned about these things too. And especially when you've been taught that health equates being smaller, it can get really messy in our brains for sure. So when I'm working with my clients in midlife that are noticing their blood sugar and cholesterol kind of be creeping up through their 40s and early 50s, and they get concerned about, what do I do about this metabolic health? I'm a firm believer that being aware of your metabolic health is part of respecting your body. So we're not saying that we're just focusing on the shape and size and you shouldn't want weight loss or anything like that. We're not saying that at all. We're saying that it's also okay to have these health concerns, and how can we work on those health concerns in a weight neutral perspective, or at least not chase down the rabbit holes of different restrictive diets. So being aware of messages around metabolic health metabolic health, meaning you should be on a restrictive diet or lose X pounds, just being aware that those are out there, and notice how triggering they can be, especially in midlife, to kind of push you to want to get back on another diet or try this other health angle because it's for your health, and it makes sense that you want to do that. But I'm going to invite you today, just as I encourage my clients, to be aware of metabolic health as an informed consumer. It sounds funny to say say that about that way about your health, but being aware of your metabolic health in order to inform your health promoted practices, that whether that's something that you work on with your own medical team, or somebody that I'm working with. So this might help you be encouraged to have a healthy relationship with food, develop a healthy relationship with food, or healthy relationship with movement. This might involve brainstorming ways to get more fiber rich foods, for example, in Fiber-rich foods help us lower our cholesterol, help us stabilize our blood sugar. And then also thinking about metabolic health is strongly affected by stress. So, if you're aware of your metabolic health, you might also want to work on becoming more stress resilient. So, is that spending time in nature, doing some journaling, meditation, whatever that might be, yoga practice, gentle stretching, however that might look for you to help you with stress resilience. So, all of these practices can support metabolic health in a body respecting way and in an undiet way. So we're not talking about lists of eat and do not eat foods or move your body in a particular way, but we are still saying, hey, it's okay to be aware of your metabolic health and want to set yourself up for success with that. So this is where gentle nutrition can also come into this mix. So, when I'm thinking about gentle nutrition or compassionate nutrition, I like to call it, again, I'm not looking at it from the perspective of eat this, don't eat this, but particularly in midlife, it might involve adding more fiber, more calcium rich foods, more magnesium rich foods, um, foods that are high in omega-3 fatty acids, and of course, that fiber, and then adding more herbs and spices too so that we get more pleasure and enjoyment out of food. So, if you're someone who has been on and off diets for years, you've done plenty of subtracting of foods to know that shitting on yourself or saying, I shouldn't eat this foods, that strategy doesn't work in the long term. It doesn't work because your diet rebel brain always comes in behind the scenes and gets the best of you when you feel deprived of your favorite or satisfying foods. So, gentle nutrition is still very much rooted in that all foods fit and food peace philosophy. And there are some small tweaks and adds that we can do in midlife that support our health even in a bigger way. So, to practice compassionate nutrition in midlife, it's critically important first to eat enough food consistently. The number of times that I see clients come into my practice and because they're coming at it from a health mindset, which often also means they need to shrink their bodies, they're not eating enough food. And that puts our body into a physiologically stressed state, which then what's that going to do to your metabolic health? It's going to increase cholesterol, increase blood sugar, that sort of thing. So it actually ends up doing exactly what you don't want it to do because you're trying to be healthy. So eating enough food consistently is really important. It's a really important foundation of this. Also, enjoying variety of foods. So I know it can be so easy to get into the habits of like, these are the top 10 foods that I go and buy at the grocery store every day, but really challenging yourself to bring in some more variety when you can. A nice way of doing this is trying to focus on more seasonal eating because different crops come available or are fresher during different seasons. And so that can be a nice, gentle way to add in some more variety. And then, of course, honoring your satisfaction is so, so, so key in midlife because there's a lot of other chaos going on in our lives in midlife. And when we can find little subtle moments to build some satisfaction and pleasure in with our eating experience, it can kind of just help increase some calm in our life. Giving yourself the opportunity to sit down for 5 or 10 minutes and just eat, just eat, nothing else, not on your phone, not cranking out emails, just eat and give yourself that time to find satisfaction with food. So once you're eating enough food consistently, it becomes easier to practice honoring other principles of intuitive eating like hunger and fullness signals and helping you continue to build that trust with your body. So, with a solid foundation in place of those basics when it comes to compassionate nutrition, you can practice adding more variety to your meals and snacks in a couple of key ways that really benefit nutrition for women in midlife. So, eating a wide variety of foods means you also get a wide variety of nutrients. And a handful of ways that you can add more variety specific to midlife include focusing on a few handful of key components, like I mentioned earlier. So, protein, calcium, magnesium, omega 3 fatty acids, fiber, and fresh herbs and spices are all kind of focal points that I think about when I'm working with someone in midlife. So you don't have to get specific with the amounts of these ingredients, crazy about portion sizes or measuring or logging or anything like that. But if you're eating them consistently throughout your most meals and snacks, you're going to enjoy their nutrition benefits. So let's go into each one of them just real briefly so you kind of have an idea of like, oh, okay, these are the foods that I could start including as more variety in what I'm already doing with meals and snacks. So I really love how my friend and colleague, Dr. Jen Salib-Huber, who is known as the menopause.nutritionist on her social channels, and I love how she talks about protein as a cast of characters. So I did theater in high school and a little bit in college. And when I heard her say this, this analogy just really resonated with me. And it means that the main characters of protein are meat, fish, poultry, eggs, beans, legumes, and soy. And that just means that there's a higher concentration of protein per serving size in those foods. So there's more grams of protein per ounce that you're eating. Again, don't get hung up on how many grams you should be having. Supporting characters include nuts and seeds, or like nut butters, hard cheeses, thick style yogurts like Greek or Icelandic, and some whole grains. And these are considered supporting characters with protein because they have protein in them, but their grams of protein per ounce of food is less than the main characters. So when I'm talking about protein with women in midlife, again, focusing more on like how do we build a plate? How do we build a healthy, balanced plate with lots of variety on it, and focusing there instead of the actual grams and amounts and calories and whatever. So when you're building your meals, your main meals, think about having one main character of protein and 1 to 2 supporting characters when it comes to protein. And if you're looking at creating more satisfying snacks, you might include one main character of protein or 1 to 2 supporting characters depending on your hunger level. So, for example, for a meal, this might be um, a black bean and brown rice enchilada. And so we've got some black beans, that's a main character of protein. We might even have some chicken in there too. So maybe we've got 2 main characters of protein. And then we have some cheese over the top of it. So there's a supporting character of protein. Other examples might be adding some pumpkin seeds on top of your salad that you're having with the enchiladas, the chicken and black bean enchiladas. So there's an example of a meal. For a snack, that might be we have a cheese stick and apples and a handful of nuts. So we have cheese and nuts as your supporting characters of protein. And then, of course, the apples are the carbohydrates. Same thing might be hummus with some veggies or crackers or something. And the nuts, the seeds, the sesame seeds, the tahini, and the hummus, and the beans are both supporting characters of protein. So they blend together and make a nice, satisfying snack. So those are just a couple of ideas when it comes to protein and thinking about those main characters and supporting characters rather than getting hung up on grams. And if you're doing that at all your main meals, you are going to get enough protein to support you in midlife, support bone health and muscle health and building muscle too. So when it comes to calcium, I invite you to think outside of the calcium dairy box. So you can add a variety of calcium-rich foods to meals and snacks, including dark leafy greens, leafy vegetables, almonds, figs, or my personal favorite is nettle infusion tea, which just means I take a handful of dried nettle, I steep it in about 32 ounces of water overnight, drain off the nettle in the morning, and drink this really nutrient rich water in the morning. You could also heat up that water again and steep another green tea bag in it or some sort of tea that has some flavor in it if you like, because the nettle tea, the infusion does tend to be pretty green, pretty grassy, but also super nourishing and hydrating too. So those are kind of my go-to calcium sources. There are great ways to add more variety to your meals and snacks that include magnesium rich foods like pumpkin seeds, like I already mentioned, whole grains, beans, and legumes. They're all great sources of magnesium. And magnesium is particularly important for women in midlife because one, it helps a bunch of different systems and processes in our bodies, like well over 100. But then when it comes to mood in particular for women in midlife, if we have a higher levels of magnesium intake, then we can more likely be in that calm state. So our like meno moods, as I like to call them, or your meno rage, as Dr. Jen likes to call them, can be kind of calmed down if we're getting enough magnesium in our diets. So, omega 3 fatty acids are also beneficial for skin health, skin, hair. We tend to start drying out a little bit in midlife, and especially if it's wintertime and you live in a cold climate, you're also going to be more dry. And so, cold water fish like salmon here in the Pacific Northwest, we have a lot of salmon around. Walnuts, ground flax seeds or flax oil, chia seeds, hemp seeds. Those are kind of some the great players when it comes to omega-3 fatty acids. And bonus, many of these foods that we just talked about, they're also great sources of fiber. So if you're getting in enough calcium through plants, you're going to be getting fiber. If you're getting in magnesium through your nuts and seeds and beans, you're also going to be getting enough fiber. It can be really helpful in midlife to aim for that recommended daily allowance of fiber of 25 grams to be supporting your metabolic health and heart health and your GI tract. So the number of conversations that I have with women in midlife around just not pooping very well, like a lot of constipation or swinging between constipation and diarrhea and a lot of irritable bowel type symptoms, making sure that we're getting consistent fiber in and consistent fluid with that can really help a lot of the GI distress that I see with women in midlife. So to kind of wrap this compassionate, gentle nutrition up, another nice thing that you can play with is adding fresh herbs and spices to your meals and snacks. And by adding fresh herbs in particular and spices, they're really antioxidant powerhouses, which can help with so much in midlife from reducing stiff joints, from inflammation. They can also help with improving a sense of calm. So herbs like lemon balm and chamomile, whether you're using those in a tea as a great way to use them, that can really help reduce that stress response and anxiety in midlife. And again, these herbs and spices just make eating experiences more savor worthy, just make them more delicious. So that can be another nice way to add variety with your foods is thinking about like, oh, I really like this sort of cuisine. I really like Indian food. I really like Italian food. I really like Mexican food, Asian food. And then go and look and see what herbs and spices those cuisines frequently use. And then start practicing just sprinkling those into any of the meals that you make and just kind of play around, just kind of experiment. So if you're not on the Savor Food and Body community weekly emails, I highly invite you to do so because every month and sometimes several times a month, I drop in recipes there that utilize many of these gentle nutrition foods for midlife and kind of give you some ideas of how to use them. And they're always filled with plenty of herbs and spices. So you can get on that weekly email list by going to my website at alpinenutrition.org and hit the contact button. So it's alpinenutrition.org/contact, and you can get on the weekly email list there. And that's where I share more tips like this, like we've been talking about in this whole series. And then, like I said, some recipes and usually some bonus support materials, whether that is a promotion for a product that I've found really helpful with myself or with my clients in midlife, or other resources and tools that are out there from my colleagues and other folks in this space. So I hope this series has been helpful. If it's felt like it was a lot of information in a short period of time, please don't be discouraged by that. That's why I've been hosting these office hours on Friday to go along with this. So please come to the office hours, ask your questions, ask how maybe body respect and gentle nutrition can be applied in your own lived experience. And again, there's a link below these videos to sign up for this Friday's office hours. And this will be the last office hours available for the next couple of months because we're going to take a break for a little bit from the office hours, not from the podcast, but office hours will go on a little bit of a break. So, thank you all for watching, for listening, wherever you are tuning in from. And I hope you have a terrific week savoring food in your body. Take care.